Alright, so today we're checking out a game I've had my eye on for a while now, Ruffy and the Riverside. Now it's a 3D platformer with big Paper Mario energy. Think chunky outlines, flat characters, all that good stuff. But visuals aside, today's all about performance. How well does Ruffy run on the original Nintendo Switch, and how much of a boost do we get playing the exact same build on the Switch 2? Because here's the thing, Ruffy and the Riverside, it isn't launching with a dedicated Switch 2 patch. What you're seeing is the same build running purely off the new hardware's extra horsepower. So in this video, I'm going to be walking you through both versions, load times, visuals side by side, any big noticeable differences, and of course, frame rate. Now if you are new here and find this helpful, drop a like, maybe subscribe. It seriously helps small channels like mine a huge amount. Alright, let's get into it. So quickly first an overview, Ruffy and the Riverside is an open world platformer where you use a magical ability called a swap to copy and paste textures from the environment. So turn lava into water, walls into vines, or skate across fields of hay. It's creative, colourful, and it's definitely channeling some Nintendo energy. Now narratively, of course, it's simple as you would expect. You're joining Ruffy on a quest to stop the evil Growl from destroying the world core and throwing your home, Riverside, into chaos. Now today, we're not diving deep into the story or mechanics. This video is all about performance, but if you do want my full review, that will be live on the channel very soon. Okay, so now let's get into the performance. Visually, the differences between Switch 1 and Switch 2 are minimal. While we've seen some games get noticeable bumps, this isn't one of them. But to be fair, it's a great looking game to begin with. Now that said, the improved hardware does help in one key area, resolution. The Switch 2 outputs 4K, which means sharper outlines, clearer UI elements, and just a bit more crispiness across the board. You'll notice it most on the character's edges and mid-distance textures, things like grass, rocks, and signs, where everything feels just a little less blurry and a bit more defined. But that's really it. No changes to how the game looks moment to moment, just a cleaner image thanks to the extra horsepower under the hood. Load times then aren't particularly intrusive on either system, in fact you'll barely notice them, and that's largely thanks to the game's structure. Ruffy and the Riverside is built around a main hub world with just a few short transition screens between zones or quests. Still though, the Switch 2's faster hardware, it does shave off a few seconds. Booting into the game for the first time takes around 8 seconds on Switch 1. It's just 3 seconds on Switch 2, so it's over double the speed. Honestly though, let's be real for the moment. When both are this quick, it's not exactly worth writing home about. But yeah, overall, faster on Switch 2, which is to be expected. I guess, put it out there. Alright, so now let's talk performance, but before we even get into frame rate, I want to call out something that is immediately noticeable as you explore the world, and that is how the scenery loads in certain situations. Ruffy is a colourful open world game with a lot of big vistas, and what you'll notice is, especially in cutscenes or when turning a corner, it's that the Switch 1 can struggle to keep up. Objects, terrain, background elements, they can pop in late, often leaving the scene looking half-loaded until the console catches up. The same goes for exploration at points, particularly when you are navigating to your hometown. As you'll see on the Switch 1, I turn the corner, it freezes momentarily, and then eventually the world, its assets, it populates. Anyways, enough of that, onto frame rate. And this is where we see the biggest difference between the two systems. Ruffy and the Riverside runs with an unlocked frame rate, which means it tries to reach 60 FPS, but in practice, neither system can quite hold it steady. Now starting with the original Switch, the game does make a real attempt to push close to 60, but what you actually get is wildly inconsistent. In smaller areas or when there isn't too much going on visually, it often hovers somewhere between the low 40s to high 40s. But start panning the camera or loading up a more complex scene and it drops fast. It's not unusual to see dips into the 20s, and in some heavier areas, you'll even occasionally see the high teens. Now, it's not unplayable, but you'll definitely feel it, especially during tighter platforming sequences. That inconsistent frame rate affects fluidity, and there were moments where it absolutely made those trickier jumps just feel harder than they needed to be. Cutscenes then tell a similar story. The in-game engine ones swing just like the gameplay, while the pre-rendered cutscenes, they aim for 30 FPS, but they fluctuate too, sometimes pushing above or dipping below. That leads to this weird sense of the scene speeding up and slowing down, which can definitely throw off the rhythm a bit. It also affects overall for gameplay input responsiveness. You'll occasionally get stutters or momentary freezes as the game loads in unseen areas, so you kind of have to wait until it's going to react again to anything you are doing. But now, let's talk Switch 2, and things are a lot better, but still not perfect. Now this version, it's running the exact same build again, no patch, but thanks to the new hardware, you're getting a much more stable experience. Now if the Switch 1 hovered around the low 40s, the Switch 2 is often sitting near 55 frames per second. It doesn't quite hit a lock 60, which was my hope, but it's absolutely more consistent and definitely feels smoother in practice. That said, even here, the game isn't flawless. Large open areas can still introduce stutters, and I will say you will see dips frequently with exploration, sometimes into the 30s, and briefly even the high 20s. But again, like overall, I will say it's far more responsive, much more fluid. It doesn't kind of fluctuate so frequently, so wildly. And yeah, I think in the end, that leads to something that feels a lot more enjoyable. Interestingly as well, on the Switch 2, cutscenes behave differently too. Those same in-engine scenes that stutter a little bit on Switch 1, you know, kind of fluctuating with that frame rate, they now hit 60 FPS with ease. While the pre-rendered ones, they seem to lock cleanly at 30 FPS. No more fluctuations above and below. So yeah, basically big improvement on Switch 2, but still definitely room for optimization. So overall with this one, performance on Ruffy and the Riverside is what I'd consider mixed, I guess. The Nintendo Switch 1 version, you're dealing with frequent dips, stutters, and visual pop-in that can really affect the feel of platforming, especially again in larger areas. Load times are good, but they are noticeably slower than Switch 2, and there's a general lack of smoothness across both gameplay and cutscenes. On Switch 2, again, you're getting the exact same game, no patch, no tweaks, but the hardware boost is making a real difference. Frame rates are higher and far more stable, the game loads in faster, visual pop-in is reduced significantly, and overall, it's just a more stable experience. And again, like this was purely a performance today. This is not an opinion or a verdict on the game itself. In fact, the first hour, really enjoying myself. And I am currently working on that full review, which will dig into gameplay, level design, all that other good stuff that really matters when it comes to 3D platformers. So yeah, keep an eye on the channel for that, because once it's live, definitely going to be worth a look. But for now, like if you are curious about how Ruffy runs, hopefully this gave you a clear picture. And if it did, drop a like, consider subscribing, and I'll see you on the next one. Cheers all.